Today, I'm joined by somebody who may already be a familiar face, especially if you've read a very popular Be More Pirate book. Yes, today I am joined by Alex Barker, who is an author, facilitator, speaker, and coach who runs Be More Pirate, a book turned social movement and consultancy that helps people and organizations to rewrite their rules. Alex works across the private and public sector, supporting them with innovation, strategy, and culture change. In 2020, she wrote How to Be More Pirate, which captures the story of the movement and offers practical ideas for how to apply the pirate principles. As an avid supporter of the Be More Pirate movement, I knew Alex would be an ideal guest for our Changemaker sessions and be able to share some practical ways in which we can all start being a tiny bit rebellious. So let's get started. Hi, Alex. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast for the Changemaker sessions.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So I am very excited to have you on the podcast because I read Be More Pirate. I think I read that in 2020. I got recommended it by a fellow pirate, should I say now? And then obviously How to Be More Pirate came along as well. So I'm sure many people will know you from those books, but what I would love to know, because reading them, putting it into practice, and this podcast is all about trying to make these things practical. What is some of the best things you've seen so far? How people have taken those lessons that you've shared in the pirate movement and kind of have made changes with?
There are so many stories in the book that I really love. Oh, just trying to pick one. Um, I think the story I'm probably most attached to is the story of CRIN, the Child's Rights International Network, which sounds not very pirate when you say it like that. But they were one of the really early adopters, and because I've worked in the charity sector before being more pirate, it just hit a nerve for me around the kind of changes that needed to be made, and the question that she initially posed to me and to us was asking maybe the ultimate difficult question for an organization, which is, should we really exist? And she said, I think as charities, most of the time we're funding ourselves into existence. We're not changing anything at all. We're at best putting plasters over problems. And I think the story of what CRIN did encompasses so many of the aspects of Be More Pirate. It's a kind of full story journey because they ask that primary question that Sam asks in their first book, which is, what am I willing to stand up and fight for? And then they go on this whole journey. They create one of the most sophisticated pirate codes I've ever seen, really, really genuinely replacing policy, like complicated bureaucratic policies or kind of vanity organizational values with a genuine code of principles that they were going to hold themselves to. They'd understood how practically that would translate into their day-to-day behaviors. And that led them to kind of reinventing the organization. They ended up working on much more radical campaigns, bolder ideas as a result of really becoming clear about the values. And then their funders and their donors backed them more because they stood out. And so it's a story of like risk reaps rewards. And so, when you're working with organizations, so many of them just don't want to take that initial first step to be that little bit bolder. And part of the reason is that values piece, that building of the pirate code, isn't done in a democratic consensus built way with the whole team buying fully in. Because I think if you're going to take risks, you've got to get your team fully in on it. So I just love their story, and they've gone on, that changed the organization, like the pirate code changed it. So that feels to me like a big piece of impact. But there are loads of different ideas. I mean, I suppose another one I love is a marine biologist, Francisca, who was based in the Caribbean, and she just did what I would consider to be a small, bold action of emailing, after reading Be More Pirate, emailing her whole 5,000 email list of scientists saying, if we all fly to our 4-year conference, aren't we just bullshitters, basically? Aren't we just talking about making huge sacrifices and changes to do with the climate, but we're all still wanting to fly to the fancy conference. Shouldn't we be putting our money where our mouth is? And that, as a result of just that one email, it exploded into her running localized events for the conference, like completely redistributing the power to, especially to countries where they couldn't have flown to the event anyway. And she really just embodied the whole of the pirate principles, the networking, the small bold action, um, standing up for your values, which was, she's like, we have, the climate issue for her had hit home that year. So yeah, there's just so many fantastic things that people have done. And yeah.
I love it. I love it. I love reading stories like that because it is those bold actions and questioning the why of we're doing something. And I love that you brought up about that, the idea of that very democratic way of trying to get things going, because we are still in a very outdated, authoritarian workplace environment in most of our organizations. And I certainly still see it a lot with people that, you have one person from the top who's really just trying to dictate values rather than getting people on board with them. And I say time and time again, well, that's not really how, it works. And it's really hard to get this change going, and we are really slow at it here in the UK. Like, I hate to disregard us as a country, but a lot of the work that we're kind of seeing coming through, we are taking so much slowness to it. I mean, what do you think is the resistance that's there that stops businesses doing something that goes out of this status quo? How can we kind of shake them up?
There's a few different key points that stop them from being outside the status quo. I think one of them is just a pure biological thing that we all have, which is we are wired for belonging. So we do not want to break rank from the group. If the group says this is how we are, like as an individual, however you identify your group, you just don't like it. Your brain literally senses threat and danger of survival, and so that is very deep wired into us. There's not much you can do other than, I think, to bring awareness to what's going on there, and recognizing that fear isn't necessarily related to the current actual situation. So when we do a bit of work on risk, I'll ask people to go, okay, well, can you at least map out for me what you think the absolute worst consequences of doing this? Like, realistically, what is the worst thing that's going to happen? And what do you think the best thing that could happen? And what do you think is the likelihood, like the likely outcomes in the middle? And usually they go, okay, yeah, get it. I'm not going to be fired probably for doing this. So that's one thing. The second is the way that we, again, social conditioning. But on a slightly different level, that isn't to do with the group, is internal, is our sense of what is normal and what is right, because that has been drilled into you for a really, really long time. For example, it's very hard to let go of the quite physical feeling that productivity is a good thing at all costs, right? I think everyone knows that. And rewiring yourself to understand, I see quite a few people doing this now, saying rest is productive. But if you're not used to that and you've been told go, go, go I still see it. You see the gap, like some job applications I often look through job applications, quite interested in how they structure them and the story. And they'll say, must be willing to work in a fast-paced environment, which basically means I just need you to work as hard and as much as possible. And if you don't, you probably won't fit into our culture. So, but I noticed since becoming self-employed that just because I was in control of my schedule and could structure rest and all of that, the guilt and the fear was ingrained, and I couldn't let it go. I couldn't let it go easily. I had to do proper work on breaking that and disrupting it. So, like I said, the inner rebellion is the hardest. It's internalized comfortability. Even if those rules or practices you're doing don't really serve you in the long run, they at least feel normal and they feel comfortable. So there's that resistance, and that, you have to create different habits that move in the opposite direction. And I think the final one I would say is distraction. And I think that's very specific to our time and place. The fact that we live in a very complex, communication heavy era. So it's so easy to become distracted from any ambitions you might have to make change. Your days are likely to be flooded with other people's agendas and with multiple ways to procrastinate. So yeah, it's hard to keep on track for all those reasons. And I think those are, that's something I talk to my parents a lot about. That's their challenges they didn't necessarily have to face in the same way.
Oh, absolutely. I love that you've hit on that internal battle that we have around our working and productivity, because I literally had exactly the same thing. It's so amazing to hear someone else say it, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, that's so relatable." Because for ages, when I was self-employed, when I first started Liberty Mind, I had this really outdated belief of that hustle culture, where you think, in order for me to be successful, I have to work as many hours as possible every single day, and I have to give blood, sweat, and tears to it. And it wasn't until I really started changing and personally working with a coach as well on sort of my life and my business. And I was like, oh, why am I working this way? I'm no longer working in a fast-paced agency. Like I manage my own time. And I remember being in meditation one day, and it just landed with me that I felt guilty if I ever got up slightly later than like 6 o'clock in the morning. If I got up slightly later, I had this internal guilt and this feeling that I was already behind on my day. And it was so strange. And luckily I had someone I could talk through this shift, and I've obviously changed the way I work. But that's something that I did not expect to have sort of conditioned in me. And it has been a huge unlearning. And that's what I think is sometimes there, isn't it? Is that we've had this conditioning from such a young age as well. It happens when we go through education. And it's like almost you're having to unlearn so much that you're conditioned with through your career. So I'm so glad you brought that up, because oh my gosh.
Yeah, and oh my god, now I want to talk about this. I feel like I had such a kind of epiphany moment when I read this article about burnout that explained to me what it was, which were the definition they gave was when all of your internal resources are depleted, but you feel a nervous compulsion to continue regardless. I was like, oh, I relate to that. Because that it made me feel like it's almost like in your body. Like I felt more anxious when I wasn't working than when I was in leisure time. Sorry, when I was working. So even if I was working and burning out, like, I'd still feel better in myself because at least I felt I was being of value in some way. And that was such a ingrained narrative about that I have to keep almost entering these new levels of and it just to do with schooling. I went to a kind of competitive school, and it was always like you had so many extracurricular activities, and it was like unlock the next level. And then I in this article it explained sort of the millennial this situation where it said you've been trained to optimize yourself within the system, and the system is now unwinnable because it's becoming so unequal. But you literally don't know how to break it out of that, because all of your training has taught you that you just have to keep going and eventually you'll win it. And it really struck me that I'd never received any kind of conditioning or training about how to challenge or change anything, because that just wasn't the narrative. It wasn't the story. I love my parents; they're absolutely wonderful people. But they also grew up in that very I wouldn't say competitive, but the narrative that if you work harder and more, you will become more successful and more happy. And that feels to me that it's falling apart now. So and the interesting thing in terms of what you said, which I notice, is it's not enough to know it intellectually. Like you can read as many articles as you want and many books, and all the books that come out every year, all the business books about rest is productive. We know that deep flow work is better for us, but you literally have to unravel the conditioning that lives within you, I think, and that is a disruptive practice sort of type of work that is completely different to just reading a book or reading an article.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it definitely is. I mean, I'm so grateful. I think that's the beauty of having someone externally from your life be able to coach you through these situations, because you can put into those habits and practices to help you change your behaviors. But yeah, being aware of it isn't enough. You need to kind of seek those resources to go, how do I change this? Because this is not a sustainable lifestyle.
Yeah, completely. And you're right. Having a coach is, I think, essential. I didn't realize how valuable coaching was until I invested in one.
Oh, honestly, I think everyone needs one. I'm like, they're amazing.
Yeah, if I could, honestly, if I could change one thing about the world of work, it would to retrain all managers as coaches,
Yes.
or not necessarily to retrain anyone who's in a management position, but to simply ensure that like management was replaced with coaching.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Basically.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many things that have happened over the past year where I think we're all kind of having to unlearn a lot of those habits. And, like you said
Mm.
about that conditioning of people thinking about changing the way they're working and not wanting to kind of take those risks. And we've seen such huge changes. And it's one of those things where I think, we are kind of having to relearn how we want to work. Like we've never had it before where we've kind of hit the pause button for 2 years, and we've finally had that chance to sit back and go, well, how do I want to work? I know so many people that have either changed jobs or started their own business because they've had that
Mm.
time to really reflect on life and the way they're working,
Mm.
or they've gone back into work and said, yes, I'm coming back, but actually I want X amount of days at home and I'll only come into the office in these times. I mean, what are some of the biggest lessons that you feel have been kind of learned over the past 2 years? I mean, unfortunately, some of them might not fruition with currently today in the news. Unfortunately, there's the whole like civil servants back to the office. But I
Yeah.
mean, what are your
Yeah.
thoughts on it?
Well, actually, I was going to say is that I don't think we have learned that many lessons.
Mm,
I've got to be honest with you. I'd love to say, I think the world is different, and certainly a lot more people have given themselves a level of permission that they haven't. More employers have recognised the blending of life and of personal life and work life in a different way. So I think things like working remotely, flexible working will have changed irrevocably, and we won't go back any to that, generally speaking. But I don't think we've really learned the lessons, which is your question, which is why is this good for us? Why is this good for the workforce? I think people have put demands on the table and said, I can do my job, but I don't know if there's been a wholesale appreciation of what we're doing here at all. I've seen very few real understanding of that, because again, I think they're still hemmed into the fundamentally the operating model of business that is drive growth, drive profit, still dominates. And so, yeah, I'm not sure we have learnt lessons. I don't think we've even learnt the lessons of things like mutual aid and what that does. That did a whole spate of interesting stuff in terms of council should be learning from the way that citizens responded to that and incorporating it into their practices and going, oh, we put a lot of red tape around some things around volunteering, and actually people step up in the moment, and they step up when they've got agency and are given responsibility. I mean, there's research on this. If you give people responsibility, they behave responsibly. Not everyone, but you can't let the exception make the rule. It's
absolutely.
got to be the other way around. So, yeah, I think sadly, I don't know if we have learned many lessons. I think obviously certain people have, and like certain organisations have, and it's brilliant to see so many people starting their own businesses and feeling freedom, and feeling that. I think okay, one thing that is positive, I'd say, is we have definitely got a better conversation about mental health now.
Mm,
I feel that people are talking more openly, recognising it because it's just too on the front line. I think you can't hide it away in the same way. And when a whole nation has essentially suffered under some level of pressure or disruption, yeah, it can't be ignored that that has repercussions.
yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really been at the forefront over the past 2 years, and it's interesting because I must agree with you. I think that's about the only thing that's really really come out of it as that I've seen a lot of companies change around things around mental health is probably the biggest change I've seen in terms of the wellbeing initiatives that have come out. But like you say, there's not enough questions about the why, like to what end. Like, we're growing, but to what end? It's kind of, there's no real thinking about it. And it was interesting, I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and they said, do you know what, I think businesses need to actually be focused more on their ethics, and they need to start having there needs to be something around that, because it's all well and good having an awareness. So we've all got much more of an awareness of how work could be, but we're not there where we're challenging it yet. We're aware of what's possible, but we're kind of like, oh, let's just stay quiet and see what happens. And it's like, oh, where's this kind of movement going to come from, is what fascinates me, because there's so many like micro movements going on in the UK. So, you know, you guys, the pirate movement has got a momentum to it. There's, you know, the 4-day work week, that's got a like micro momentum to it. So there's all these kind of like pockets of momentum, but it's like we need more people to join these movements.
Yeah, and it's funny, isn't it? Because I often have these conversations with friends or people involved in those kinds of movements around like reinventing work, and the tension is always like, is this taking off? Is it taking off? Like, we feel like we're, and I'm like, are we just in a bubble? Because it's true, like, you know, it's great to see like 2,000 or so companies deciding to do self-management or thinking about their ethics. But then, you know, when you think about the number of companies there are and the ones that dominate, yes, Mark Zuckerberg still holds 60% of the shares on the board, you know, and can essentially dominate board decisions. I mean, that's a concentration of power in one of the world's most powerful, richest companies. So I don't think you know, they can wax lyrical about community and connection all they want, but that is top heavy. Yeah. So I think, I don't know. Is it changing? It is changing, and it isn't at the same time.
Yeah.
And it would be good to join all these ideas up. But I would say to make that happen, if I was going to do one thing in an organisation, mandatory for every organisation, it would be intelligent disobedience training, or what we call professional rule breaking. Although I steal the intelligent disobedience ideas, because the reason why you can't even get to the first stage of changing something is because nobody has the levels of confidence and understanding behind why challenge is a good thing. It's a good thing for organization. The military knows this. Like, if you look at military training and exercises they do particularly in the US, they know that in order to keep the platoon safe, everyone has to be hyper vigilant, and the ability to make difficult calls that break from the group rank, depending on the situation, because it is so the level of change they're experiencing on a battlefield will be so rapid and so volatile. And I think that, you know, in the business landscape, there's the illusion of stability all the time. So you think, well, why would I make a move? But then everything can change at once. So yeah, I'd give people the tools and the skills and the knowledge behind how you challenge constructively, and not in a way that creates defensive-ness amongst leadership, but in a way that creates connection and understanding.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, can you imagine if you equipped people with that? That would be amazing.
Those are my long-term goals.
There we go. Long-term goal. Create more rebellions. I love it. Why not?
I mean, you call them rebellions, I call them constructive challenge.
Oh no, I definitely agree. I think that's because I speak to a lot of people. Obviously, I'm sure you probably get the same as well within working in the areas that we do in kind of organizational change. You always get friends going, how do I do this? So my boss is doing this, and they always like come to me with like agony on advice about how awful work is, and they'll give me a scenario and be like, what would you do? And it's really hard because they do feel so disempowered, and it's really painful, you know, when you say to people, well, have you thought about this? Or oh, well, I can't do that because, you know, and, you know, I remember one of them saying that their CEO sent this awful email. And I was like, well, did you challenge this? I said, because you're in your right to challenge this email, because it was really quite ableist and sexist. And I was like, you're within your rights to challenge this email. Oh no, I don't want to do that, because I don't want to be the one that gets labelled as the one that makes the noise. And I'm like, oh, but how many other people are sat there thinking the same thing?
Right, exactly. I do get those scenarios all the time. And I do think it is real that people get ostracized when they challenge, even if they can't really, the leadership can't do anything drastic, they'll find somehow they'll get shut down in some way. And I do think that's real. So what I always say is there's one of two options. You activate those people who are probably sitting there thinking the same thing, because they 100% are, if it's completely nonsensical. And a previous an organisation where a friend works at the moment are doing that, and it's gotten so big they're unionising over some of the stuff. So find your crew and take them outside the office to talk about it, pub, cafe, whatever. Find a way to vent your frustrations and then figure out what you're going to do together and back each other. But then that's when you get into the code building, and like, how are you going to back each other, and are we really going to do this or do something? The other option would be for them to temporarily ignore that one situation and find their power elsewhere, because you can't make a change from a point of already feeling disempowered. I think on an energy level that is likely to fail, because also if you're coming at it from a point of all the anger and the frustration that you have to first, I think, turn that into something more like fuel. If this is common, if you just stick your hand up in the meeting when the thing is announced and it looks really bad, and you go, I don't agree with this, and all the bad feeling that you have comes out with what you're saying. And human to human, the person will feel that. They will feel that you are hostile, and as primarily animals, we respond badly to that basic stuff. So I would say, go, right, I'm going to do something about this. Don't let that moment pass you. But this is what most people do. They go, oh, I'll just, it's too much, I can't do anything. Try and find a degree of power elsewhere, because you will also have more ability to influence that situation. If you've done something valuable elsewhere, you can start to bargain for it. So and that's why I think the pirate rebellion is, I try and say, it is more creative. Like, your goal is less to slam the doors, I'd say, but is more to create new precedents for things that you think will work better. So rather than just shouting it down or throwing stones at the system, as I'd say, what is the new system? If you can't answer that question, or the new rule, the new norm, think again.
Yeah, build something better. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that is some
offer something better. It's like, we're going back to the well-being point. I've seen quite a few LinkedIn posts recently about, don't just offer us yoga class. I mean, I've literally been through this, by the way, as well. Don't just offer us yoga classes, fruit in the kitchen, as like the results of our well-being survey. Let's have an open conversation about how recruitment is conducted. Like, why do people, can we have some more transparency around pay scales? Can you help me develop my career path? Like, those are the things that really matter to people, that really affect your mental well-being, because they keep you awake at night. Maybe can I get some exercise in this week? But I think it's lower down the rung. Yeah. So it's almost saying, can you offer the leadership an alternative that will set a new precedent, that you can make a case that will work better, that will benefit? And ultimately their goals are the productivity and the efficiency and the ultimate probably profit of the organization. So if you can show that would support that, yeah. Which I know doesn't sound necessarily so pirate, but I'm keen to not have pirates burning out.
Yes. Absolutely. No, that has so many practical bits there, Alex. I feel like there's so much to take from that as well. It's amazing. So I'm really, really grateful for you sharing all of those tips. I mean, when you think about everything that's been kind of put out there recently, like we've kind of touched on a few things, in terms of what people are now bringing into the workplace, what do you think is one thing that is going to be changed or gone completely over the next sort of 5 years? If you were to make a prediction, is there anything that you're like, right, this I feel is going to go or definitely have changed?
So I've just been reading the book Uncharted by Margaret Heffernan, in which she basically says don't make predictions. So she's like, predictions are kind of like a capitalist game most of the time. So
Or what do you hope will be changed?
yeah, I
Here's
mean,
a hope.
I think
Yeah.
if I was to predict, it would be, I think, like I said, we won't go back to any kind of location-based work full time. I think almost all companies that are worth working for will, unless, what you're doing depends on you being there, knowledge work, let's say, won't go back to that. You'll be able to do your job from anywhere, 100%. The degree to which that affects team culture is an issue, but I think we'll work around that. And at the very least, people will be able to take longer periods of time away and things like that. So I do think that will be bedded in. There's too many advantages for the individual, and I think everyone kind of wants to see that. So that would be my prediction. That won't go away. Because also they give up more office space. Companies are seeing the financial benefits of that and all of that. So that would be my prediction.
I think that's
not a very bold one.
a pretty solid one. It is. It's interesting though, because obviously we've also got to consider like the rate of tech and how that's massively influencing our ability to be virtual. I mean, I remember in 2020 I did my first VR talk, and that was a whole weird and wonderful experience. But that was just reminding me that the technology that is constantly advancing, and we don't know where it could take us. I mean, some people hadn't even used Zoom before 2020, and now we're looking at all of these crazy other amazing virtual environments where we can go and kind of pretend that we're meeting for coffee. It's just the rate, I think, that technology is advancing is also going to be so much more flexible compared to what we're even used to right now. It's pretty standard at the moment, but even that could open some pretty interesting ways of communication.
Yes, it could. The technology conversation is like, I think, a whole big one. I thought the other day, it's interesting how in the Industrial Revolution, the people operating machinery and the latest technology would have been like the lowest paid. And now we're in this situation where the people in control of technology are essentially just a 1% who then thrust the technology on the rest of us and go, right, this is how you work now. And yes, there are advantages to it for sure, but the fact that very few people understand it properly, understand the impact, have had no chance to debate it, even think about the consequences before it's suddenly decided this is your life now. That, I mean, I suppose that has always happened to a degree, whether it's cars, TV, radio, that's always been the way, but it doesn't feel that it's, like you said, working at quite the same pace. Or it wasn't then as it is now. Now the pace is so huge, and that is likely to just hasten inequality because people will not be able to keep up. You can see it in terms of older generations not understanding certain technologies, and because they haven't been brought up with it, they don't necessarily even see it as something they ought to have to learn, and then they can't do certain jobs. And then the younger generation, I would say, and this is quite a cynical point of view, I suppose, but one of the things that worries me the most is they're just becoming brands. People see themselves as a brand and a point of selling. And when I'd like to move, we probably ought to be moving far more towards, an evolution in consciousness, a huge pull towards more capitalism, and I think what's really interesting in the work movement space is the tension between like the kind of make work more human and then the advancing technology and where they meet, because you kind of have, I feel like they meet at Harvard Business Review. Because you can see them saying, yeah, we get it, more agency and like more psychological safety, and at the same time go kind of like being in that elite bubble. So
Yeah,
that's
so
I
true.
don't know the
It's
answer.
so true. It is, because I think for those that there is a disparity between those that are working in it, and it's like anything, isn't it? We all have our worldview of how things are, and until we bring more people into that worldview, we have a very limited capacity of understanding other people and knowing what they are. And I always refer back to the Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg back in the day, and everyone was kind of praising it for this really amazing feminist piece. And I'll never forget reading in it, there was a bit where she was saying like one of her wins at Google was that when she got pregnant, she insisted on having pregnancy parking because she'd had to walk a certain distance to the office. And I was like, so you didn't think about that before you had any other people? Like, she wasn't the first pregnant person at like Google. So it's like, until it's like most people, until it directly impacts you, don't make that change, because we're so kind of inward rather than going, oh, what's everyone else's experiences of this? And that
Mm-hmm.
happens so often in the workplace. Yeah, I mean, that's
Yep.
pretty much a day to day, isn't it? That the biggest choices that happen are that directly impact people, they're not considered as part of it.
Yep. I think anyone who's got a disability will quickly tell you that. And yeah, that is the kind of, I suppose, ethical case for diversity, is that you are definitely shutting out other people's experiences of how the workplace, or how they experience the world, and that's why a co-productive, consensus-driven sort of decision-making process should be implemented, I think, and should be better. But at the very least, like advice I try to give when we do workshops, and particularly when we talk about the edges of the map, which is my favorite bit, because people like that, because it's clouded in innovation and disruption, which are the sexy words. But ultimately, what I'm saying is, go and have conversations with people who don't have your life experience. Like, that is your first step, because you'll learn something, and there might be a few steps before you decide to implement something, a change in policy or whatever, as a result of that conversation. But think about it as an enriching of your horizon. Like, the idea that you think you've got an understanding of how things are, like you say, we all have our worldviews. It's why people start campaigning for fundraising after they or someone they really care about has been affected by an illness, and then they suddenly want everyone else to care. And the thing is, fundamentally, we don't do these things until we're impacted. But it would be far better if, in a general decision-making process in a workplace, you invited in someone who'd had a terminal illness, say. And I use that example of diversity because it's not one that's usually touched upon. We tend to go to race and gender and things, but imagine you've had a terminal illness. Think about what that person can tell you about courage, and what that could bring to a business perspective, like so much. And yet, diversity is still, unfortunately, a bit of a tick box. It's got, disability. I mean, if you live with a disability, you have to overcome hurdles all the time. And not that you should necessarily be, using your employees as like, help us solve the problem, but it's about the richness and of life experience. It's all really valuable. So
yeah, absolutely. I love that idea of the map as well. That's a great analogy, Alex. So gorgeous.
I can go into the map. The map. I've really got a lot to say on that.
Oh, well, you've given, honestly, I'm so grateful, because you've provided so many practical things that I feel people can take away with them from today, so that no matter where they're sat within their company, they can kind of go and do something. So I'm really grateful for that. So I thought I'd do a bit of fun in this season and do a quick fire round if you're up for it. So, when not at work, where will we find you?
That's like very triggering of like my probably still at work. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm better there. I'm better these days. Ideally, I would have been sort of, traveling. Like, that's the thing that I love the most. But likely with friends or yoga.
Oh yeah, love that.
Yeah.
One.
Or doing some of that the map stuff, exploring new places, like trying to do practice what I preach.
Yeah. What's one business word that you want gone from our dictionary, our vocabulary? You just want to scrap it. You hate it. What's the one word?
Yeah, I was thinking. There isn't one word. It's always the context in which it's given. But I think I'm going to go for engagement. How do we? I think I've said it too much in a previous life. It's lost all meaning.
It feels so sanitized now, doesn't it? It feels very sanitized, that word. Yeah, engagement. Yeah.
Engagement. What's our engagement level? How do we engage people more? Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't bring up anything for me.
One book or podcast recommendation?
I've got to say this. Can I say the
Of
same book I
course you
just said?
can.
But Uncharted, Margaret Heffernan. I am loving this book so much. It's slight confirmation bias because a lot of our ideas are very similar to our pirate philosophy, but there's really great stories and facts in there. Even just learned the whole history of the Sagrada Familia, which I didn't know, and that was really interesting. Lots of great examples of businesses and kind of insights into how companies have operated, and I just think it's a bit of a must read.
Oh, okay. I'm adding that one to my wish list. If there's one thing you could disrupt, what would it be?
Management consultancy.
Yep. Saying
Yeah.
nothing. I had someone outreach to me recently with that experience. So
I just fundamentally cannot tolerate companies that position themselves as a change organisation when they're a sales organisation.
you heard it here first.
I've got a friend, Kieran, who we've talked endlessly about how we could try and do that. Anyway.
Oh, Alex, thank you so much for having this conversation with me, and for sharing so much of your knowledge with us as well from your experience. And yeah, I mean, is there anything we should keep an eye out for in the pirate realm? What's upcoming? Is there anything we can navigate people to?
Okay, I'm going to say something. It's one of those what Sam calls a future truth that once you say it, you have to do it. I have just started creating what I'm probably going to call like 30 days to be more pirate, which is literally to do the thing that you and I have just talked about, which is that we have to decondition ourselves. So reading books, great. I'm really glad you've read our books, but it doesn't get you there. It doesn't get you to the deconditioning. Equally, nor does one-off workshops, which is usually what I do. You have to practice it daily, ideally. So we're going to do a really short course that'll be like peanuts, where it's like a 5 minutes or 10 minutes every day, and some of the days will have action, like some of those practical things I said today, like things you've got to do. You've got to test yourself. But every day it will be motivational things as well, because I feel, listening to everyone over the last few weeks, we need to feel better. Like, stuff's a bit rough. And daily dose of inspiration and some deconditioning. That is to come. So,
Amazing.
I've only just started with it, but
Ooh, I'm excited to see that. I cannot wait. Well, I'll make sure there was plenty links in the show notes. So for anybody that's interested in that, all of the details will be in the show notes. So make sure you go onto the Be More Pirate website and sign up and check that out, because that is a great step forward. And thank you so much, Alex. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Make It Thrive, the Company Culture Podcast.